Today we are going to be ranking the villains of One Piece, and by we, I mean me.
It's me!
I am not, however, going to be ranking them on the strength of their villainy, not on the strength of their charisma. I'm not even going to be ranking them on the strength of their strength. No, in this video I'm going to be ranking these villains on the strength of their plans, on how good of a plan they had to begin with, as well as how close they came to executing said plan before a certain rubber rapscallion got in the way of things. And in the interest of not having this video become unmanageably long, and in the interest of giving myself more content for future videos, quite the planner myself, you see, I'm only going to be covering the villains from the East Blue Saga in this video, and I will have future videos that explore future villainy. Alright, so to kick things off we have our very first villain, which is Higuma, who is going to start us off with a very low bar. His original plan, speaking of bars, was to go to Party's bar and have a drink. However, when offered a drink by Shanks, he promptly threw it on the ground, which is not very conducive to drinking it.
What are we supposed to do with one bottle?
Generally, you drink it.
We're already off to quite a bad start. His more nefarious plan, however, involved kidnapping Luffy and taking him out to sea to drown him. Oh, while he gets some points for successfully kidnapping Luffy, he loses all those points immediately by sailing right into the home turf of the Goa Kingdom's local sea monster and promptly getting eaten by it. In addition, Luffy is then saved immediately by Shanks, making the outcome of Luffy alive and Higuma dead very much not what Higuma was hoping for. So let's induct him into our spectacular failure tier list and move on. Alvida doesn't really have a plan per se, just sort of existing as a pirate in the East Blue and bragging about how much of a big shot she is. Brags that in hindsight just become more and more hilariously misguided as the show goes on. I suppose she sort of planned to keep Kobe as a slave on board her ship for forever, and Luffy pretty swiftly put a stop to that. But again, not so much of a plan as just something she was already doing. In our first encounter with Alvida, there really is no real plan going on, so she can at least rise slightly above Higuma, although not by much, as she is going into the non-starter tier. Axe Hand Morgan and Helmeppo now, who I'm going to treat as sort of a 2-for-1 deal. In the anime and the manga, it is purely Helmeppo's idea to string up Zoro in the courtyard. The live action changes this so that it is Morgan's idea, whereas in the anime and the manga, Morgan is more concerned with his own erection. That is to say, the erection of a statue of himself. Across all platforms, though, these two get pretty handily rolled in what they were trying to do. Morgan's statue gets knocked down, he gets demoted, Helmeppo doesn't get to kill Zoro, he in fact then enters into the beginning of his redemption arc, so they are going to be yet another entry into our spectacular failure tier. You know, considering these early blunders, it is insane to think when you look back on the opening episodes that Alvida and Helmeppo are actually going to be like semi-important figures in the final saga of One Piece, with Helmeppo being Kobe's friend in the Marines and with Alvida being a part of Cross Guild. How far they've come. Speaking of Cross Guild, however, it's time for a big step up in terms of flashiness, as we are turning our attention now to Clown Town, and by Clown Town I mean Orange Town, in which there is a clown. Up till now we've had more tone setters than true antagonists, but Buggy the Clown gives us our first proper One Piece villain. Buggy's plan when we first meet him is primarily to terrorize Orange Town and steal all of their treasure, and you know something? You have to hand it to him. He sure did terrorize that town. He even managed to capture Luffy at one point, and albeit briefly, he got Nami on board as a part of his crew. Now while the fight certainly doesn't end well for him, he certainly did achieve a modicum more success than his predecessors. So that is going to earn him what I will dub the solid effort tier. Good job, Buggy. Next up we have the main course of this video, the poster boy of planliness himself, so much so that it's in his epithet, Kuro of 100 plans. Now, to give credit where credit is due, Kuro's original plan of faking his own death in order to get the Navy off his back worked a treat. He and Django pulled that thing off without a hitch, and honestly, if he'd stopped there, he may well be sitting pretty at the very top spot on this list. Unfortunately for everyone involved, however, including Kuro, he did not stop there. Instead, he pretended to be a butler for 3 years, he earned the trust of Kaya, Kaya's parents, the village people, all the while secretly scheming to steal Kaya's fortune through the means of murder, patience, and a little light hypnotism. And you know what? For a while at least, his plan does work. Kaya's parents even die of natural causes. Brilliant, didn't even have to lift a finger for that one. Truly, everything is coming up Kuro. Unfortunately though, the key stage of the plan is where it all starts to fall apart, and Kuro's primary undoing isn't even Luffy, it's not even Usopp, it's Kuro himself. He jumps the gun and attacks Merry prematurely, doesn't even kill him, which allows Merry in turn to reveal his deception. In addition, he berates and disparages his own crew so much that they begin actively rooting against him and cheer for Luffy when the two of them fight. Those aren't even his only blunders, but to my mind they're some of the biggest ones. So look, I can't knock Kuro's ambition, but when it comes to the execution, it all just falls apart completely. There is one positive, however. Kuro's whole endgame was to retire rich and relaxed and anonymous, and we've barely seen him since the East Blue, so in a sense he has faded into obscurity, which is kind of what he wanted, just without the rich and relaxed part. As far as we know, he's still very not rich and very not relaxed. So, you know, it's not quite a spectacular failure, and there was some things that were going right, which is something, just enough something to induct him into the there was an attempt tier. Speaking of men with ambition, however, next up we have Don Krieg, who had already earned his reputation as the worst pirate in the East Blue, mainly due to his use of deceit and dirty tactics. He initially planned to sail his fleet into the Grand Line and just keep on conquering, but unfortunately he ran afoul of a certain hawk who was in the area, and after having his fleet decimated, his next plan is then to hijack the Baratie and sail that into the Grand Line. Do you know what? A small part of me kind of does wish that he succeeded in that, if only for the mental image conjured of that big bloody fish boat going up Reverse Mountain. So look, on the one hand, I kind of respect Krieg's MO of, you know, the deceit and everything, his absolute commitment to just dishonor the whole no fair play in piracy thing. It may not make him an endearing character, but you can't deny it's got a pretty solid success rate up till now. In the Baratie arc itself, however, this turns into less of a success rate and more of a suck rate, because this guy sucks. Got him. Although he causes quite a scene and does do some minor damage to the Baratie, by the end of the whole ordeal he has gone through every weapon and had them trounced by Luffy. His ship is sinking, his men are beaten, Gin disobeys a direct order from him, and the Baratie to this day remains anchored firmly in place. So this ends up being a pretty poor showing for Mr. Krieg here. However, to give him a slight bit of credit, he did already sail into the Grand Line, and I think if not for the pure bad luck of running right into Mihawk when that happened, Don Krieg could have made a bit of a name for himself in the Grand Line. It's just, his luck fell through, and it fell through hard. But even after being beaten by Mihawk the first time, he was undeterred and wanted to go back out there, so that is going to earn him a there was an attempt. Let's just slot him in right below Kuro. Next up in our long list of foes is Arlong. Now here was a big man with a big plan, or rather a big fish man with a big fish plan. Said big plan was to abuse Nami's chart drawing skills in order to give himself a superior geographical knowledge of the East Blue before conquering it. First the East Blue, then the world. Now I do appreciate that Arlong was going to pace himself, you know, let's do this one sea at a time, and his strategy of just collecting and having the superior information before enacting this plan, it's a pretty solid tactic. But there is a slight hitch in what I've just said, because Arlong's plan, it's all in future tense. When we face off against Arlong, he hasn't actually conquered the East Blue yet, which actually puts him a step behind Don Krieg in terms of accomplishments. I mean, Arlong was spending all this time just biding his time, waiting patiently, planning to conquer the East Blue. Meanwhile, Don Krieg was already out there just doing it. He had the charts, sure, he had the strength to do it, and at the time he still had Nami caught in his web of wordly trickery. But he just hadn't done anything beyond that. The impression I sometimes get looking back at Arlong is he and his crew rocked up to Kokagashi and got a little too comfortable. They got a little too content playing the long game, so much so that they forgot to play the game at all. Complacency becomes Arlong's undoing, because he truly had everything he needed. He just never took that next step. And of course, Luffy destroyed all of those charts that he had Nami make, which erases all of the work he had done up until that point. All that time painstakingly saving up before making any big moves. All just gone quite literally out of the window. And so that means, rather underwhelmingly for the main antagonist of the East Blue saga, Arlong is going to be in the same tier as Alvida in the non-starter tier, because what can I say? He didn't start. It's insane that Don Krieg technically got further than him. It's insane. Now look, so far the East Blue villains have had a pretty poor turnout on this list. I mean, look at them. Oh, they're all that clustered down there at the bottom. Oh god. But all that is about to change, because we have one more stop before hitting the Grand Line, and that is Logtown. Here we have the unlikely alliance of Buggy and Alvida with their oh-so-specific plan of get Luffy. And amazingly, considering what we've seen of these two up until now, they do. They may stumble and bumble their way into this situation, but at the height of the Logtown arc, Buggy has his sword above Luffy. Luffy is out of action on the execution platform. Buggy was literally seconds away from outright killing Luffy there and then. Luffy even accepted death with the trademark D smile on his face. He was just like, oh, I'm sorry, Buggy caught me. I guess this is where it happens. Luffy is only saved by this random lightning bolt that strikes, which is either pure coincidence or more likely the timely intervention of one Monkey D. Dad. If not for that, Luffy would be dead. End of One Piece. The Buggy-Alvida team-up puts every plan that we've seen so far to absolute shame. No one else on this list so far has even come close to a fraction of the success that Buggy and Alvida saw in Logtown. So in quite the flashy fashion indeed, Buggy and Alvida as a team will make it to the Icarus tier of this list. Because they just came oh so close to actually doing what they set out to do. They flew far closer to the sun than anyone who had come before them. And although they did fall at the last second, it's still a pretty damn impressive feat. Meaning, in terms of the plans that the East Blue villains had, Buggy and Alvida, of all people, are the undisputed champions. Alright, so those are the villains of the East Blue ranked on how well they did at all of their respective plans. But you can let me know who you think had the best plan in the comments section below. Do remember to like and subscribe, especially if you want to see the inevitable sequel to this video, which will likely cover the Alabasta saga. But until we get to that point, all there is left to say is thank you all so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.